Danny Taff, and I'm Head of Communications at Climate Action Network International. This is a press briefing coming to you live from COP30 in Belem, and I'm really pleased to be joined by Anabella Rosemberg, who is our Senior Advisor at CAN International, Climate Action Network International, on just transition, which is our big demand here at COP30. So, Anna, you're going to run us through a bit about just transition. First up, how old is just transition? It's pretty new, no? Or what? Tell me more.
Hail, Danny. What a pleasure to be here with you as well. So yeah, just transition is not new. Just transition has been in this first outside in the social movement space for a really, really long time, almost in the 70s, when unions and community groups were using that as a framing against attempts from conservative governments to put jobs versus the environment. That sounds familiar with these days, saying that we need to protect, if we want to protect jobs, we need to kill climate regulation. Well, that was happening also then. And unions coined this idea that we need to make a pact, a social pact, where workers and communities are protected so that we have environmental ambition. Since then, a lot of things happened. But in the UNFCCC, a very unlikely coalition of governments since Copenhagen, a long time ago, worked together to ensure that that message was also incorporated in the climate discussions. And we're talking here about Argentina, the US, Venezuela, working together to get just transition language there. That coalition got much bigger and managed to get just transition in the Paris Agreement. But then we didn't get more than words and some dialogues. And this is coming back then to the COP, in particular this COP30, with a very strong demand from civil society and trade unions, like saying, well, this cannot just stay words. We need to support workers and communities. We need to figure out how we do more than messaging. And very specifically, we need to acknowledge that, in particular in developing countries, how do we create those alternative jobs if we want to transition away from fossil fuels, if we want to move away from extraction? The fact is that the economy is absolutely locked in. So we need to figure out how we do more ambition. And that is what this proposal for the Belem action mechanism is about. It's facilitating coordination, accelerating support, and giving also communities, workers a seat at the table, also at the global level, to inform that work.
So we're coming to the kind of midway point, shall we say, of COP30. How are we looking? Have any countries supported just transition? What's the sense when it comes to, say, global South countries? Are they welcoming this? And maybe you could tell us a bit more about those who are kind of in favor of just transition, where they're at now.
So week one has been extremely interesting for us all. We have seen, we have been working as civil society, again, together, not only CAN, not only the Climate Action Network, but also folks from the trade unions, feminist groups, youth, indigenous peoples. We've been really pushing very hard on all governments to embrace this idea of an actionable mechanism. And this week, on Tuesday, so the first day of negotiations at COP, the G77+China, which brings together more than 140 countries in the negotiation, represents the biggest negotiating bloc, announced its support for a global just transition mechanism that basically brings a lot of these functions that civil society has been asking for. So it has been a major breakthrough. Unfortunately, we are not seeing a similar level of enthusiasm on many developed country governments. In particular, we are not seeing that in the European Union. We are not seeing that, of course, in Canada, Australia, the UK, Switzerland, countries that on the one side say that they support just transition, but within their borders. And they don't see, or they claim not to see, the need for organizing that transition together in cooperation. And that is the biggest missing piece from our perspective in the global governance of climate action.
And what's you're super passionate about this, which is amazing.
Really?
What's your kind of background? Like, what's your story? We've known each other a few years, but tell us a bit more about your kind of union work.
So I started working almost 20 years ago on environmental issues in the labor movement. So my job was basically to convince the unconvinced. And I traveled the world meeting coal miners, meeting workers that were actually in those front lines of the change. And what I witnessed working for them, with them, and I still feel they are my family as well, is that there is so much more empathy, curiosity, ambition in that movement at the grassroots, in the workplaces, that what we tend to assume in the environmental space. And I think in big part is because we are not creating the space for those voices to be heard, and because we have a lot of second guessing that is coming probably from a privileged perspective. We think we know what the working class or workers around the world want. We are scared that they would be against climate. My observation for more than 20 years is that if the conditions are in place, if they have a voice and a seat at the table, they have a lot of ideas about how the economy could run differently for the benefit of the many. And I think this is for us a massive opportunity. Talking about just transition, getting something concrete, it's also a very important signal that this process is sending at a time where populist misinformation is actually being used to say that climate action is for the elites. To a certain extent, that's true. It has been working to enrich even further the elites, but we need a different kind of climate action. And I think that's the message that Just Transition sends, and one that I think resonates a lot with working people out there when we create a space for it.
So we're hearing a lot, like in some of the hallways, different chants about BAM, BAM, BAM. Fill us in. What is BAM?
What is BAM? BAM is an acronym first, and it's an acronym that stands for the Belem Action Mechanism for a Global Just Transition. We found that it was important to bring something a little bit more spiky to Just Transition, and it's indeed quite spiky. Oh, I didn't show that it's a spiky logo that we have on BAM. Actually, because it's very difficult to cut through the way in which I would say media and communications across the board tell the story of this COP. I think we have become also used to the regular themes of the COP meetings. So we know we are going to be talking about mitigation and nationally determined contributions and finance, and we are used to say north and south, and there are so many tropes that we are so used to that this just transition idea and demand is not necessarily being very well understood. So we coined this idea of the BAM, both because it has sense, and we have a briefing that contains all the necessarily policy wonk recommendations, but also because we are sending this signal to the world that we need a BAM.
And so, makes sense to me, but for those who are skeptical, what would you say to them? And what kind of things are you hearing as to why they're not buying into the BAM?
I think there are several layers of skepticism. There is of course the bad faith skepticism. So countries that have been blocking progress forever, that don't want anything out of this process. But let's put them a little bit to the side and let's assume that everyone is coming here in good faith. And what are those skeptical commentaries? One of them is the UNFCCC is already very bloated. There are a lot of committees, there are a lot of institutions. Do we need something else? So that's an important concern. We don't want to add burden to the UNFCCC. That being said, the rationale for us pushing for this is that there are so many just transition initiatives out there with zero coordination and not really responding to the climate challenge that we need to bring all of that together. We need to figure out it's more efficient as well to have the just energy transition partnerships and a bunch of things that are happening out there to connect to the principles of the convention and the Paris Agreement, and ensuring that all of that is supportive of 1.5 aligned pathways, supportive of resilient pathways, because we also want just transition to be applied to adaptation. So for us, this is a missing link. The other, of course, rationale is cost. who is going to pay for this committee? The reality is that we are talking about something not very expensive. It's just the possibility of bringing together the whole just transition community, maybe once in a year, for a big strategic conversation that will take us further on the how we advance ambition. When we see the amount of money that even the EU is spending in little committees and practice sharing for different little projects that are donor driven, I mean, we could easily save a lot of money on those by having all the just transition community coming together. So there are these little, almost petty concerns that have been raised. That's why our hope, and going back to the negotiations, we are expecting today new text that is going to have a specific option on the Belem action mechanism. And our expectation is that all the developed countries that have developed just transition institutions in their countries or region, because they've been doing a lot, Canada, Australia, the EU, UK, they all have been doing a lot of experimentation on just transition in their countries. Our hope is that take the opportunity of this new text to think about the kind of mechanism that they would like to see and engage in good faith with developing country parties and with us, so that we have the best possible outcome.
What would be your ultimate dream for this COP30? Like, obviously you want just transition realized. Could that happen at this COP? Or what are you thinking?
Just transition will only be realized when people activate their power also at the country level and movements manage to organize this planning and these conversations that are needed. I guess when we all have different assumptions of what the COP is for. We all think that maybe we have different ideas. From my perspective, and having been around for unfortunately quite some time, I think one of the biggest values of this process is to give legitimacy to all the movements and groups that are fighting for things on the ground. So a decision from the COP that, yes, creates a mechanism, but basically says that just transition matters, it's also a really important tool for the unions, for the communities, for the people that are fighting for this on the ground, and they are many, to say, you know what, you, government X, government Y, you've said that this issue was important, that we have to be included, that we have to fight for more support from international institutions, so let's do it. So it gives more legitimacy to those demands, it gives more people a voice. So my dream of this COP is one that we manage to see, I mean, in media coverage, I mean, coming from this COP, in the way in which people hear what this COP is about, they can see that we are fighting for social justice here. That is the missing link of climate ambition. And that is leading to still a place where multilateralism is trying to deliver for working people, which is something that, well, I mean, right now is pretty much questioned, with reason.
Now, any questions in the room? People, oh yeah, could you please say your name and your outlet?
My name is Anabella, and I work for Wired Italia. And I would like to ask you if you can list the main countries opposing just transition negotiating rules, please. Thank you.
Thanks so much for the question. So until now, but I guess we don't lose hope, we've seen quite strong opposition from the UK. I mean, that was very clear on its lack of willingness to now, up to now, to see a new mechanism being created. We've also heard that in the past from Canada, from the European Union, from Switzerland, from Japan, from Australia. Our hope is that moves, but until now, they are raising all these concerns that I was talking about, like, do we need another institution when we have technology? Yes, I mean, it's connected, but they are raising, I mean, almost petty arguments that I think show a lack of preparation, I mean, when it comes to engaging in this negotiation and taking it seriously from our perspective. Fortunately, we are helped, I think, by extremely skilled co-facilitators in this negotiation, and I would not underestimate how important that is, because they are really bringing very good quality text if people read the decision on just transition, I think it's one of the few that normal people could read and say, well, this kind of makes sense to do something like this. It's not like full of brackets and full of things. I mean, yes, there are some tensions. There is a tension, for example, whether fossil fuels is going to be mentioned or not. There is a tension about whether, contentious issues like CBAM, the border tax adjustment, is going to be mentioned or not. But it's very simple placeholders. And actually what you read is a real intention to address social justice in the transition. What we are missing is what are we going to do about it? And that's a bit what the Global North is being, I would say, a bit petty about like raising almost procedural issues instead of trying to figure out a solution. Delaying, saying, well, we can probably discuss about this next year. We're not really sure what you're talking about. Let's talk a little bit more. Let's have yet 400 more workshops before we find it out.
Do you see a different spirit here in Belem in comparison with the last couple of COPs, 3 COPs?
Luckily, the just transition space, it's a little bit different, I have to say. And it's a bit different also because negotiators are also a bit different. These are not the typical negotiators for other issues. Generally, they engage genuinely on just transition. So we've always managed as a community, I would say, to land in some more, I don't know, cooperative space compared with the more traditional topics where the fault lines are so well known and everyone repeats a little bit what they've been repeating forever. If you go to these contact groups, they are still talking new stuff. So I think it's always quite refreshing and also keeps me awake in the negotiation to always find new things. But I do think that the mood in this COP, I think it's in some of the rooms is very tough. Like, for example, in the agenda, in the agenda conversation that the presidency is running on the most contentious, never solved issues of the COP, because they're talking about mitigation, they're talking about finance, they're talking about trade. They really bundled the most difficult topics. But on the just transition, we can clearly see that this is a space where an agreement can be found. And this is why we are extremely hopeful, not only for the just transition activists, but also for the COP to deliver something that on the Monday after the COP ends, we can say, well, a concrete step towards advancing social justice so that we have more ambition has been found.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you for your questions.
I'm just thinking now, so
a
far,
question there,
role yep, but just checking,
Yep.
for unions, how involved are they in this work with you?
They are extremely involved and they have been critical on this. I mean, for us as Climate Action Network, we don't want to steal the concept from the unions. We want to be supportive of the work that has been done. And of course, we bring also probably additional elements to it. For example, reclamation and reparation of ecosystems after polluters leave. We know this is a massive gap. I mean, when coal mines shut down, when power plants shut down, they leave the communities like on their own and corporations are not paying for that. For us, a critical part of just transition is, of course, creating new things, but also repairing what has been left behind. That is a contribution, I would say, of environmental justice groups. Same for feminists, that they are bringing also care, for example, to the framing. So I think, yeah, unions are absolutely into it. I think they're also embracing some additional dimensions that we are bringing it and making us, I think, all of us stronger through that convergence.
Hi, Stephanie from Secret Austria. I have 2 questions actually. First one, what are the most important things about BAM that the countries support? And second question, you said it was a major breakthrough and that there is hope that at the end of COP there could be something useful outcome for transition. So what is like the most important thing that should be in the text in the end regarding transition?
Mm-hmm. So the most important two things we support, there are a lot of things that we support on the BAM proposal coming from the G77. But the first one is that it's saying very clearly that we cannot limit that decision to principles, that something needs to be created to support and coordinate just transition initiatives around the world. So that for us is a very important point. And the second point that could be strengthened, and we will fight for strengthening it, is that it needs to be an inclusive mechanism. So it connects to the most important thing that we want to see in this decision from the COP, which is your second question. For us, is the launch of this mechanism here in Belem, basically bringing these functions together so that this is not reopened later. So to bank the idea that this new institution will coordinate, will support, will share good practice, but also that is going to give us all, and when I'm saying us, I'm saying all the right holders, so whether it's communities, workers, feminists, indigenous peoples, a seat at the table in that new institution. Because if we want to do a just transition, we need to do it together. It's not only governments planning it. And that would be also, I think, bringing a lot of fresh air to this negotiation. It brings all those new voices in a space of empowerment and agency.
So it's new institutions, new just transition institution. Should that really be included in the next COP, for example?
Yes, but not necessarily. So what we are saying is that we want this whole just transition community through this institution to come together and be organized. It also includes creating a network where people can, for example, country X, Gabon, is trying to put together a just transition plan. And basically there is this network that is already created with lots of agencies that are already working on it, with other countries that have been doing it, that can facilitate and support faster. Also, the Green Climate Fund, that until now has only been giving 3% of its portfolio to support just transition policies. It could be there and accelerate the time for these projects to come to life. So first is that support thing. And then that community could be meeting in September every year. It doesn't need to come to COP. What we could have at COP is coming from the little political committee that will probably be decided later, not here in Belem. What we could have is some particular elements in that conversation that is worth having in the negotiations. So basically curating a little bit what is needed from the COP, from a negotiation perspective, from what the community of just transition needs. And that's why this idea that this will add more burden is not really, at least it's not what we want as civil society in our proposal. We just want a home for something that right now is absolutely fragmented and duplicative all around the world.
A question has come in online from the journal. Thanks, Kevin. Of the countries you've called skeptics, which one is most likely to move?
We have high hopes at least for the EU, UK, Australia. I would say name those three for the time being, that they basically get more reasonable. These are groups that do a lot of work on just transition at home, and the gap between what they're doing at home and what they are willing to do globally, it becomes too big. So many movements, many groups are asking those countries to change. Today, Can Europe and 350.org have launched a series of petitions for the European Union to change its position, and that for us is an expression of support also from lots of civil society to make that shift. We know that trade unions and civil society in the UK have also been engaging with the minister, with Ed Miliband, to see whether they could move. They were giving a fossil of the day from the Climate Action Network, the first fossil of the day of the COP because of this position. And we also have all the Australian members, Can Australia, also with other groups, asking the Labour government in Australia to basically walk the talk of the just transition commitment. So as of today, and as we engage in week 2 of the COP, Our hopes are clear. Our expectations are there. We do think that governments can crack this if they are engaging in good faith. And we can hopefully get something useful for the world out of here.
Great, thank you very much. That's going to wrap it up. Great way to end. And for those of you in the room, if you'd like to interview Anna, she'll be available afterwards. Thank you very much. See you all tomorrow.
Thank you, Dani.